The very first thing I'm feeling as I tune into this collective energy is a kind of rising. Like something that was coiled, quiet, patient, something that has been gathering its strength beneath the surface for a long, long time, is now beginning to move. And I don't mean that in a threatening way. I mean it in the way that truth moves. Slowly, then all at once. There's a version of you that knew. Even when you were smiling, even when you were trying to make it work, even when you were giving yourself reasons to stay, some part of you already knew. And I think a lot of you have been at war with that knowing for quite some time. Because knowing something you don't want to be true is one of the most exhausting things a human being can experience. You end up fighting on two fronts, against the situation itself, and against your own clarity. This is interesting, because what I'm sensing isn't just heartbreak or disappointment. What I'm sensing is something more like the aftermath of long-term disorientation. This feels like someone who has spent months, maybe longer, trying to decipher a code that was never meant to be deciphered. Trying to understand mixed signals that weren't mixed signals at all. They were deliberate. They were calculated, even if not always consciously so. Have you noticed how much mental energy you've spent trying to figure this person out? The replaying of conversations. The rereading of messages. The asking of friends, the sleepless nights where you rehearse what you should have said or try to interpret what they meant by what they did say. That level of mental labor, that is not what a healthy connection asks of you. Love, real presence, it doesn't leave you feeling like you need to solve a puzzle just to feel safe. And yet, somewhere along the way, that became normal for you. And that is what I really want to talk about today. Because what's coming through so strongly is this energy of emotional unavailability that was never announced. Nobody sat you down and said, I can't fully meet you here. Nobody said, I'm going to give you just enough to keep you close but never quite enough to make you feel certain. It wasn't spoken. It never is. That's the insidious thing about emotional unavailability, it operates in the language of almost. Almost there. Almost committed. Almost open. Almost ready. And you, being someone who leads with feeling, someone who is deeply intuitive even if you don't always trust that intuition, you felt the distance. You felt it in the silences that stretched a little too long. You felt it in the warmth that came in waves, abundant when things were easy, absent the moment any real emotional weight appeared. You felt it in the way they could be present for the surface of you but seemed to retreat the moment you went deeper. This feels like someone who gave more than they received. Not because they were naive, but because they were genuinely, wholeheartedly invested in something they believed could grow. I'm picking up on something here, a kind of flowing emotional current that was very real on your end. This wasn't fantasy. This wasn't projection. The feeling was real. The investment was real. The love, or the beginning of something that could have become love, that was real. What was being offered back to you, though, was something else. Something murky. Something that moved in currents that never quite followed a predictable path. And that unpredictability, there's something important about that. When someone is emotionally unavailable, they often create these rhythms of hot and cold, of closeness and distance, that begin to feel like the natural pulse of the connection. You start to time yourself around their moods. You start to calibrate your needs based on what they seem able to hold that day. You learn to read the room before you speak. You shrink. You wait. You become hypervigilant in a relationship that was supposed to feel like rest. Does this feel familiar? The energy shifts here. Because there's something else underneath all of this that I don't want us to rush past. There's a kind of awakening happening for so many of you right now, and it isn't just about this person. It's about you. About the part of you that is waking up to your own power in a way that was maybe dormant for a while, suppressed, not by force, but by circumstance. By a relationship dynamic that kept you small. By a connection that asked you, subtly and continuously, to question your own instincts. I'm hearing something like, you are bigger than what you've been fitting yourself into. And that feels significant. Because one of the ways emotional unavailability keeps its hold is that it makes you doubt the size of your own experience. You start to wonder if you're being too sensitive. Too much. Too demanding for wanting basic emotional reciprocity. Too intense for needing someone to actually show up. And when you hear that enough, even unspoken, even in the way someone sighs or changes the subject or looks away, you start to believe it. You start to carry their emotional limitations as though they were your personal failings. That is the part one want you to hear clearly today. Their inability to meet you was never a reflection of your worth. It was a revelation of their capacity. At first this looked like just a story about heartbreak. But now it feels more like a story about reclamation. There's something about timing that keeps coming through. A sense that things are moving, that a kind of energetic reckoning is underway, not in a dramatic, explosive way, but in that inevitable way that truth has. Like water that finds the cracks eventually. Like light that gets in no matter how many curtains you draw. What I feel is that clarity is arriving. Not all at once, not in one definitive moment, but in pieces, accumulating, gathering, becoming undeniable. And some of you have already started to feel this. You've started to notice things you couldn't see before. Patterns that suddenly make sense. Moments you dismissed that are now, in retrospect, obvious. The subtle signs of their emotional unavailability are becoming visible in a way they weren't before, and it's almost like your nervous system is finally exhaling after holding its breath for a very long time. There is more to this than it first appeared. Because what's also coming through is this sense of spiritual intelligence at work, like the universe, or your own higher knowing, was waiting for you to be ready for this clarity. Not because you needed to suffer through it longer, but because there is something about where you are right now, emotionally, spiritually, energetically, that is uniquely positioned to receive this truth without being destroyed by it. To hold it, integrate it, and transform it into fuel. That's actually remarkable, if you sit with it. For those of you in this collective who are still in the thick of it, still tangled up in hoping things will change, still sending the benefit of the doubt when your gut is screaming otherwise, I want to speak directly to you for a moment. You're not imagining this energy. The confusion you feel is not a sign that the situation is complicated beyond comprehension. It is a sign that you are being kept in a state of confusion deliberately, not necessarily with malicious intent, but with a kind of self-serving inconsistency that has the same effect regardless of intent. And that distinction matters, because a lot of you have been trying to decide whether to be angry or compassionate, whether to assign blame or understand. And the answer, as it almost always is that both things can be true at once. They may not be a villain. But they are also not good for you right now. There's a balance here that I keep coming back to. This quality of holding two truths simultaneously, the love and the limitation, the good moments and the harm they caused, the person they sometimes were and the person they consistently failed to be. Many of you are very skilled at this, almost too skilled. You've become so good at holding both sides that you've lost track of your own experience in the process. You've become a mediator between your pain and their potential, and in doing so, you've abandoned yourself. This is interesting, because the energy here isn't asking you to stop having a compassionate heart. It would never ask that. That heart is one of your greatest gifts. But it is asking you to include yourself in that compassion. To be as generous with your own pain as you have been with their complexity. When did you last give yourself that? The energy changes again here, and what I'm feeling now is something I can only describe as a kind of momentum beginning to build beneath the surface. Like a current that has been running slow and quiet and deep, and is now beginning to move faster. More decisively. More purposefully. This is the energy of you beginning to choose yourself. Not in anger, not in retaliation, but in that quiet, sovereign, undeniable way that comes when a person has simply had enough of betraying their own knowing. There's a clarity coming in that feels sharp. Like the difference between looking at something through clouded glass and suddenly having the window cleaned. The scene hasn't changed. But you can finally see it for exactly what it is. And with that clarity comes something that might feel uncomfortable at first: grief. Real, honest grief for what you hoped this could be. For the version of this person you fell for, whether that version was a glimpse of who they could be or a story you partially constructed because you needed it to be true. That grief is not weakness. That grief is intelligence. It means you were genuinely present for something you valued. And it means you are finally in the honest territory of acknowledging what it actually was, instead of what you wanted it to be. Let yourself grieve it. You are not a fool for having loved someone who wasn't able to receive it properly. You are human. I want to talk about what's waiting on the other side of this. Because there's a richness coming through. An abundance, not just materially, not just in love, but something more fundamental than that. A fullness of experience. A life that actually holds the depth you've been craving, because you will no longer be pouring all of that depth into a container with holes in it. I'm picking up on the image of a river moving freely. Not blocked, not dammed, not redirected into someone else's landscape against its natural course, but flowing. Finding its own way. Following its own intelligence. And there's something extraordinarily alive about that image, because I think many of you have been suppressing the full current of who you are for the sake of a connection that couldn't handle it. You turned yourself down to a volume that felt manageable for them. And you are not a volume that should be managed. You are a force that deserves room. There's a sense of many things aligning now, many possibilities beginning to converge, not all of them visible yet, but present in a way that potential is always present before it becomes form. This isn't wishful thinking coming through. This is genuine energetic movement. Things are shifting for this collective. The door that this closing, or that already closed, is not the only door. It was never the only door. It just felt like it because you'd invested so much of yourself in it. Take a breath. Something keeps coming through that I don't want to let pass without addressing. This quality of mental speed, of a mind that is extraordinarily active, that processes everything, that sees patterns and makes connections and never fully lets itself rest. So many of you in this collective have incredibly active inner worlds. And that has probably been both a gift and a complication in this situation. Because your mind kept working at this connection, kept trying to understand it, kept generating new frameworks for explaining the inconsistency, the silence, the mixed messages. You are not someone who gives up easily on a mental or emotional puzzle. You would rather solve it than surrender to the uncertainty. But here's what I need you to hear: some things are not puzzles to be solved. Some things are simply what they are. And the sooner the brilliant, tireless mind you carry can accept that this particular situation has already revealed its answer, that the inconsistency itself is the answer, that the emotional unavailability itself is the message, the sooner all of that magnificent mental energy can be redirected toward your actual future. Because your mind turned toward your own becoming? That is extraordinary. That is something that can build an entire life. An entire world. The same intelligence that kept you up at night trying to decode someone's behavior is the same intelligence that, pointed inward, pointed forward, can create things that genuinely matter. Things that are worthy of what you carry. I'm hearing something like, stop solving them. Start building yourself. For those of you who aren't sure yet whether this reading applies to you, this is a collective, and energy finds who it's meant for. If you've made it this far into this reading, something is meant for you here. Even if it's just one piece. Even if it's just the permission to stop questioning your own experience. You're not too sensitive. You're not too much. You're not broken for needing consistency from someone you loved. These are not character flaws. These are signs of emotional health being expressed in a situation that was emotionally unhealthy. The problem was never the size of your need. The problem was the smallness of what was being offered. And this distinction is one of the most important shifts you can make right now, moving from a story where you are the problem to a story where you are simply in the wrong environment for your particular kind of flourishing. A tropical plant in a cold room isn't a failed plant. It's a plant that needs to be somewhere else. The environment is changing. It already is. I want to slow down here, because there's something gentle coming through, and I don't want to rush past it. There's a love in this collective, not for the person who kept you confused, not for the situation that diminished you, but for you. From you. This slightly wounded, still hoping, quietly courageous version of you that kept showing up even when it cost you. That kept trying. That kept believing in the possibility of something real even when the evidence was mounting against it.